Hey everybody, Alex Price here. Welcome to an impact lab that I have been thinking about for a really long time. Navigating DEI, a candid discussion in an era of change. It's presented by our advisory firm, Mission Impact Strategies, and we want this to be. We know that it's going to be a compelling hour. It's a very sensitive topic. It's emotional. Um, there is controversy there. We want to acknowledge that up front. But at the same time, we want to honor your time here for the next hour. If you're joining us, you're a leader in some capacity at a company, a nonprofit, perhaps in higher ed or in government, but you lead or help lead an organization, people, and you've got pressures and stakeholders. And we want to thank you for your time investing in yourself because these are complex times. And while this lab here, this hour is not about a recommendation at all moving forward, what it really is about it's about really arming leaders with a whole range of perspectives to where they can be equipped to make great, wise decisions as a leader and not go it alone and not to maybe get information in a vacuum, but to get it from multiple perspectives because everyone's in a different spot. But we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to be kind of moving through the introduction real quick. If we could go on to the next slide here. We're going to be dedicating the final portion of this time here to your questions. So please submit them through the chat throughout the hour. We're going to be we have Amy on my team is going to be sort of curating those. We undoubtedly won't be able to get to all of them live, but we will get to all of them after the fact, the ones that we're not able to address via email, newsletter after the fact, because we want to make sure that all questions are addressed in the best possible way that we can. So submit those questions into the chat. In fact, we can move to the next slide. And this is just a brief moment to kind of share what Mission Impact Strategies is. It's pure passion. My team of advisors has each 20 years plus experience making positive change in communities. That's what we're doing now through our firm. We want to help organizations in all sectors amplify their impact and influence. We do that through external communication, philanthropy, coalition building, and public affairs, sustainability, environmental sustainability, as well as just leadership development for individuals that have leadership responsibilities. So reach out to us if you have needs in any of those areas, or if you just want to have a quick powwow to discuss what you're wrestling through right now in your leadership journey. On the next slide, I just want to give a shout out to our wonderful public-facing team. These wonderful and beautiful people are a true inspiration to me. Our team of advisors at Mission Impact Strategies. We also have amazing people, by the way, that are sort of behind the curtain that with help us out with our whole marketing strategy for our firm. And they are some of the most talented people in the world. Completely blessed to be sort of in the company of some of the brightest people I've ever met. And they're just a blast to work with. On the next slide, it's really time just to tee up what we're doing, and I've essentially, I think, given you a sense of where we're coming from. I want to just acknowledge, and I think it's good to acknowledge that I'm a bit nervous personally walking into this. I had people say, "Hey, good on you for not being, afraid to tackle what a lot of people are really thinking about privately." Other folks saying, "Hey, maybe you shouldn't do that." And but we thought, you know what, we should, no matter what is going on in our culture and in our society and in our environment. Leaders are walking through that. And so we need to address those topics, whatever they are. And again, our heart in all of this is to kind of give you an up-to-date sort of broad range of information of sort of where we are at in 2025, how different organizations are responding, and there's a whole range. Some potential ways to consider moving forward that maybe you haven't thought about, and hopefully to get your wheels turning that there are different ways to go. And again, every organization has a different mission, different set of values, and serve people with different priorities. And so it's not a one size fits all in any stretch of the imagination. But I'm really glad I don't have to tackle this on my own. I want to begin to introduce to you a dear friend of mine. If we could go to the next slide, before he comes out on our virtual stage here, Kevin Burch is one of the true great people I've gotten to meet in my 25-year career so far, for a bunch of reasons. Someone I deeply trust, was one of the people when I thought, if I'm going to tackle this issue, I want to tackle it with someone that I really do trust and that has a similar heart to help leaders lead well. And so Kevin is a global tech leader, a global IT leader, 30 plus years experience in big global organizations. He's also a workforce and talent expert and thought leader. I had, the real privilege of getting to actually work not in the same department in any stretch, but while at Office Depot, while I was leading the corporate affairs and community philanthropy work there, he was in leadership in the IT department. But also, in my role, I always seek out who are the leaders in different departments who have passion for community, who have passion for people. And I very quickly found Kevin, and we became fast friends. And it's just great to have him aboard. I could go on and on and on, but like you said, you can read his bio on his website, and you should. But let's if you would, I know I'm excited to hear from Kevin. Kevin, come join us, my friend. I'm so glad that you're here. I know I didn't do you full justice with that introduction, but we just don't
Actually,
have
you
time,
did.
my friend. We got too much to tackle.
Yeah, I think you probably gave me more credit than I deserve, but thank you. It's a pleasure to be on this webinar with you, my dear friend. Absolutely.
Well, I want to dive right in. I want to dive right in. There has been head spinning change over 2025. In some ways, there's been head spinning change for the last half decade, decade. I mean, depending on when you start that journey, but especially over this last half year plus. And some of that change has been gradual. Some of that change has been sudden for many people. Kevin, was there a moment along kind of your leadership journey, especially as the CEO of BCivilized Solutions, um, where there was a moment where you're like, okay, we have now entered a new space, and how am I going to respond?
That's a great
In
question,
fact, in fact, I
Alex.
want to bring up a slide that's going to
Yeah,
illustrate
that's
that
a great
moment.
question. And I will tell you, it all began with a fateful night. Um, I remember going to bed around 10 p.m., a little later than what I normally do, Alex. I typically go to bed at 9 p.m. because I'm one of those 5 a.m. club guys, own your morning, elevate your life. So to get up at 5 a.m., you need to go to bed a little early. So I typically go to bed around 9 p.m. But on this particular night, I went to bed around 10 p.m. And I will tell you, during the course of that night, I found myself tossing and turning, and I was really having a hard time sleeping. And around a little bit after 3:20, I grabbed my phone, and as you can see, I have on glasses. But I grabbed my phone, and I didn't grab my glasses, and I started typing some stuff on my iPhone. Then I put it down, laid back down, and tried to go back to sleep. And then I found myself jumping up again and grabbing my phone and not grabbing my glasses. And I'm typing, typing, typing. And then I put the phone down again and try to go back to sleep. Then a few minutes later, I did the same thing. I jumped up, grabbed my phone, didn't grab my glasses to start to type. And this is what I typed, Alex.
Let's bring that next slide up.
So if you look at that screen, it's all jumbled. You can see that I had 3 emails that I sent out to myself at 3:23 in the morning, 3:25, 3:29. And as you can see, there is all kinds of weird language like Haing's website and inclusion messaging, domain flow. I don't even know what I'm saying, digital capacity. I don't know what I'm saying here. But essentially, at that moment, I realized that with BCivilized Solution, when I founded BCivilized Solution, part of my mission was to create pathways for digital inclusion for individuals from underrepresented groups. And I recognized that The night before, Donald Trump became president of the United States, right? He was just elected. And I realized that there was going to be this moment where there was going to be a big pushback against DEI. And in order for me to be effective and make it easy for organizations to continue to do business with me, I needed to change some of the language on my website. I had already started hearing this type of conversation during the course of 2024. And I recognized that this moment meant that if I wanted to continue to be impactful, I needed to get rid of some of the language because I didn't want to be a target or make it difficult for organizations and people to do business with me. So that was the moment for me. It was last November.
Well, it's interesting. And if, I've heard versions of stories like that through our partners and through trusted, former colleagues. And, look, leaders, you have a ton of responsibility when you're leading an organization, right?
Right.
And, we all have personal, positions on issues, and we all have things that we're passionate about. But we all have to be able to lead well in different environments, in different cultural moments. Um, you know, Leadership terms come and go, and I don't think that we're called to stay on the sidelines when our party isn't leading the way. We have to lead in all environments. But
Right.
those moments are moments. I mean, clearly, here you are this many months later, and it sounds like it's still a very visceral moment where you're like, okay,
Yeah,
I got to make some actions like ASAP because I don't
absolutely.
want any disruption in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So given that, I want to go to the next slide here. Given your story is so emblematic of so many other leaders' stories, um, I think it begs the question, how do we get here? And I think people have different experiences of like, you know, what the last year's been like, what the last 5 years, 10, 15 years, but we've experienced tremendous social ups and downs and changes. It's like an EKG machine, it
Yeah.
really is. It was a boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom. And
Yeah.
if you've been out in the leadership space over the last half decade, decade plus, you've been in it. I mean, you have been in it, and it can be head spinning for a lot of folks. I want to take just a few minutes and almost kind of level set for those not that slide yet. If we just bring down the slides for a moment, and Kevin, just kind of let's talk for a moment about how we got to this moment here in
Yeah.
2025, so that
Yeah.
everyone can kind of almost have that refresher a little bit.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. Alex, I think for many of us, the moment was 2020, George Floyd, right? I think
Mm,
that when we had the George Floyd incident, that was a telling moment in America, right? I think that I had been in the technology leadership space for a while, and I have friends all over the country that are Black leaders. After George Floyd was killed, there was a moment where people wanted to know what is this experience being Black in America? What is this experience working in a corporation and being Black? All of these things, I think individuals started to see some of the things around the Black experience and began to, want to understand more about it. I think because that moment with George Floyd was so horrific. And by the way, I've never seen the video because I refuse to watch someone suffering. So I've never seen the video even 5 years later. But I think that moment made individual organizations take a moment to say, there is something different that's happening with Black people. So you began to start seeing like Black Lives Matter began to get a lot of traction. Um, Critical race theory began to get some traction in some of the schools. Most people that I know that were Black leaders were being called to express what our experiences have been or have been in corporate America. So everyone that I knew that was a leader, there was a town hall or something for individuals to learn about it. So there was a huge effort to learn more about some of the trials and issues being Black in America. I think, the New York Times did a segment, did a big report on the 1619 Project. So there was this awareness. Everyone wanted to know more. And companies spent a lot of money. You had CEOs sending out letters, sending out statements around, here's our position on this. And you had companies coming up with social justice programming and things like that, significant investments. But something began to happen. A few years into this, you started to see a shift. All of a sudden, Black Lives Matter didn't matter as much. Critical race theory became viewed as a very controversial way of teaching. We can't have this in the schools. Marxists, right? You began to start seeing that, and it began to just kind of you started seeing it politically, but then you also just started seeing it with certain groups. And it began, on the news, you started seeing it. And then all of a sudden, I started seeing the emergence of this term, merit. This idea around merit. Maybe we should base things on merit versus DEI, right? DEI eventually became weaponized. It became weaponized. In fact, I was speaking with a chief people officer, and this individual said to me, DEI is weaponized, and not only is it weaponized, it is second only to a hate crime in terms of bad things in the corporate environment. And I said, wait, come on, that can't be true. I mean, that has to be hyperbole. He said, no, absolutely, that is the case. So right now, that's where we are. I think it really started a lot in 2020. I know that you may have a perspective that it may have been started before then. Yeah.
And it's interesting. No, and I think for many people, 2020 obviously was a historic year in so many ways. It's like, you got to go back to like 1968 to find a more similar explosive year culturally, right?
Right.
Being on the tip of the spear with corporate affairs and corporate philanthropy, it was interesting. I was about 10 years into leading corporate philanthropy at Fortune 500 companies come 2020, from 2010 on to 2020 at 3 different companies. And so I saw a slow kind of evolution over the course of the decade, the 2010s and the teens, where sometime I would say around 2014, 15, and certainly 16 and 17, the way in which associates wanted to engage out in the community went from kind of purely kind of cause driven. Hey, let's go serve food. Let's go build a house. Let's go do some of those kind of just like pure kind of hands-on volunteerism things, to where if you really wanted to capture the hearts and minds of a corporate employee base, your best kind of the best tool you had in the toolkit became more around ARGs, ERGs, different affinity groups, because they started sprouting up in the more kind of leading edge companies. There was more interest in employees going out and serving in various affinity groups out in the community. And so I started saying, wow, if I want to galvanize, and if I really want to get our employees out doing good, that seems to be a stronger kind of tie than like just going and volunteering. So I was like, okay, well, that's really interesting. I want to capture that energy and really do a lot of good with that. And then I started seeing that even before 2020, there was giving. The giving categories started to, most companies have 2, 3, 4 giving priority categories, and you started seeing an emergence of giving categories around, again, with kind of leading edge companies. Where I wasn't seeing social justice, it was more around kind of, we were still seeing the word equality and
Right.
racial equality. It was kind of seeing, it was before you saw kind of the term equity become so prominent. And then when
Right.
2020, the summer of 2020 came, it was the only thing anyone would ask you about was, what are you doing for social justice from a philanthropic and community perspective? Everything
Right.
else was still important, of course, but there wasn't a lot of public interest in it. I was at a company where the C-suite said, hey, Alex and team, what's our response going to be? We don't want to do anything inflammatory, but we want to we need to be in this space in some way, because that is what really society is seemingly calling for. And
Yeah.
so in that role in that company, we came up with what I think was like a really good balance kind of approach to be able to enter into that work. Um, but it was interesting. It sucked all the oxygen out of the room
Yeah.
in our space in corporate philanthropy and corporate affairs. Not that we weren't doing all the other things, but all the interest publicly and inside the company came around this equity space. And it's been interesting, really. I think going back to late 23 up until now, there's been kind of a slow walk back, certainly in the last 6, 7 months. So so we are here, and what it's really interesting to me, and in fact, Amy or Steve, if you could put up the next slide, I think this is fascinating, is looking at all the myriad of ways organizations, big and small, are responding to this, again, historic time 5 years ago, historic time now. We saw a lot of activity then, and now you're seeing a ton of activity. I kind of was, it's interesting because what you're seeing here are big Fortune like 100 companies, because it's really easy to get the information. There's a lot of stories, a lot of media around it. Um, and so you're seeing some companies pulling back almost entirely from things they were literally was the tip of their spear up until very recently. They're pulling back entirely. Some that are really, really passionately standing their ground in a big public staunch way. We're seeing a lot in the last two kind of sections are where we're seeing a lot of seeking a third way. Is there a way to, hey, we've seen some value here, but we've also seen that there's controversy. Is there a way to salvage some things that we saw that are really valuable, but also really minimize risk and not create unwanted adversaries? And then a lot of organizations are understandably sitting and waiting to see who's going to take the spears and then kind of make decisions based on what they see the kind of front runners doing. And again, I want to acknowledge that a lot of folks that are in our audience don't work for these organizations, of course. Then they work for companies, nonprofits, higher ed, but all organizations are fitting somewhere into here. And it's not a one size fits all, right? There's different brands stand for different things. Customer bases are calling for different stances. Stakeholders that really drive the profitability or not of your organization have an opinion, and you got to weigh all these things as a leader and your personal your what you personally stand for, and try to make smart decisions. It's perilous time, wouldn't you say?
It is. And you know what's interesting, as I look at the list, I mean, you see brands here. I mean, obviously these are huge brands. What I would say is we're our society, we're going through a journey, and we really don't know where it's going to land. I mean, there are certain companies that have said, listen, I can see the writing on the wall. We don't want that. What we say sometimes in my hood is we don't want that smoke, right? We don't want to deal with that. So I'm just going to pull back altogether, and I'm going to be compliant. There have been some that have said, like the Costco's of the world, we're going to stand firm, and we're going to push back. And certainly they are taking. They have some, there are customers that they're losing. There's some brand damage there, but at the same time, there are individuals that are saying, "Listen, I love what Costco is doing, and I'm going to renew my membership. I'm going to, now try to get as much as I can to support them." What's interesting when I look at like Walmart seeking a third way, Walmart and Netflix, I recently saw something where there was a request to get information around affirmative action, some of the affirmative action data for both Walmart and Netflix. And my understanding is both of those organizations, their boards push back saying, they're not going to provide that information. And so I think early on, there was a lot of criticism, maybe with a kind of like Walmart, but now you can see where they're trying to do some things. But I think for the most part, this sit and wait that's where a lot of people are going to be, right? Let's wait and see, because we're in a unprecedented time. I think that over the course of the next few weeks, months, years, this is all going to change, because we're going through this. There's the sentiment, in the communities about this. There's a sentiment in the boardrooms, and there's the other part is it good business, right? Is it good business to do this? So we're going to go on this journey. I think that it will be something that over the course of the next few years, with this administration and even the next administration, we'll get a lot more clarity around it in terms of how companies are going to engage.
And it was funny, when I was thinking of sitting and waiting, I kind of dug a little bit deeper and was like, they're not entirely sitting and waiting. I mean, you look at Lowe's. I think that they had 15 different associate affinity groups, and they've kind of quietly merged them into one. So Lowe's
Yep.
just has like associates that want to be involved, I guess,
Yeah.
in a broad sense. Amazon has not necessarily changed anything, but they're doing no external promotion. They've kind of brought everything, whatever their suite of DEI sort of initiatives programs, they're really kind of bringing that private. Deloitte, while sitting on the sidelines in a way, they've also put out a mandate to all global associates to remove things like pronouns from email signatures. So, in a sense, sitting and waiting, there is no such thing as purely sitting and waiting, because if you're not doing anything, you are standing your ground, quietly, or
Right.
you're quietly pulling back, but you're just not doing it in a loud sort of way. But it's interesting. And so everyone probably in our audience is, again, in some kind of leadership in private sector, public sector, education sector. And their organizations are doing one of the four, or some sort of weird combination of the two, not weird, but some sort of, you know, some mashup of these responses. And I wanted to say, it's what the kind of thing where there is no Monday morning quarterbacking. People are having to make decisions in the moment,
Yeah.
not knowing what future public opinion will be, right?
Yeah.
But really
While the
trying to,
plane's flying, right? While the plane is flying, making those decisions, right? Yeah.
it's tough. It really is. It really is. You know, I want to kind of go back to the basics for a second, Kevin, and really talk about just terms and definitions, because I think, as we all know, and I'm a
Yeah.
communicator at heart,
Yeah.
the power of language, but words also take on new meanings over
Yeah.
time, or can be twisted by adversarial groups they meant one thing 5 years ago. Now they mean something very different. So I love just a level set on the terms in terms of DEI, MEI. What are we talking about? For some people,
Right.
MEI might be like a brand new kind of construct. So if we could go to the next slide and really, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of briefly, just hitting on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. I mean, right. So DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? I mean, it's a framework for hiring, promoting, how people are treated within organizations, and largely the focus with DEI is really inclusion around all people, right? And recognizing that there have been groups that have been underrepresented in the past, and really trying to do something to, if you look at underrepresented and discrimination and identity and disability, really do something to ensure that individuals that fall into these categories, that they're given a fair share, right? That we remove any type of bias or barriers for them. So that's largely what it is, right?
Well, yes. And I think, people have been hearing this term, to a great degree for a half decade or more, and it was called different things in the decade that led up to it. It was
Yeah.
for just diversity. You heard different acronyms and stuff, and it kind of landed here.
Yeah.
MEI, that you've been hearing for a year or two. For some, that's going to be brand new. And so I want to go to the next
Yeah.
slide, Amy, if we
So,
could.
yeah. So MEI, which, merit, excellence, and intelligence, the real key word here is merit. Really, that's really the key word. And it's interesting, if you remember, when our new president was his inauguration address, he talked about it, right? That we were going to be in a merit-based society, and largely focusing on, the hiring and promoting is focused solely on qualifications, solely on skills and performance, right? Getting away from some of these identity things and really focusing on contributions, qualifications, skills, and performance, right? And so that's really where the focus is. One can argue whether or not we truly live in an era we're really going to that point. I think for the most part, merit has always been recognized. And so the focus here is really around merit. The excellence and intelligence, I have my personal opinions about those, but largely around the merit piece, focusing on recognizing and promoting based on qualifications, their skills, and how people have performed.
Well, let's go. If we go to the next slide, we kind of look at these things side by side
Yeah,
for just a second and just
yeah.
take a quick look at this. But what's compelling to me, and now let's go directly to our next slide here.
Well, let's stay here for a second. Can we stay here for a
We want to
second?
stay here?
Yeah,
All
just for a
right, we'll stay
second, just
here.
to make
Let's
sure.
stay here.
Right. So you look at these two frameworks. So one framework, the DEI framework, largely about let's remove these barriers. We have these barriers and we want to remove barriers so individuals can thrive, so individuals can be the best that they can be, so they can contribute more. So that's one framework. Then you have this MEI framework, which is really saying we want to make sure that we recognize, ensure that the skills and the contributions matter. We don't want to just basically remove the barriers and so forth. So these are two different frameworks. And when you look at them, I don't necessarily believe that they are diametrically opposed, right? I don't think it's necessarily either or, right? Maybe it's and. Maybe it's that they complement each other, right? Maybe that we
Okay, so
create an
cue the
environment.
next slide. Let's
Yeah,
cue the next slide because to me,
yeah, exactly,
this is a
exactly.
really interesting idea,
Yeah,
Kevin. And I
right,
think some people are, by the way, some people are gonna honestly, they're gonna push back on this. They say, hey, that's an idealistic thing, or there's no such thing. They'll naturally skew one way or the other. But boy, I think this is worth speaking about for a moment. Is
right,
there a way to take things that are really valuable and might be there's nothing that's universally agreed upon per se, but that is generally agreed upon as valuable and good and worthy, and to be able to bring in the best of different frameworks. And if we see negativity in frameworks, to be able to say, hey, let's not have that be a part of this. Is this possible? And is this idealistic? Is this possible? Is this what you
well,
think the third way?
in my humble opinion, I think this is it, right? I think that I believe that if we create an environment where individuals, we remove those barriers so individuals can be the best that they can be, and they can bring that to an organization, and then we recognize and we celebrate the contributions. I think that's a good place to be. So to me, when I look at those two frameworks, I believe they complement each other. I believe that bringing them together, there's part around the barriers and there's also part around the contributions and recognizing it. To me, maybe it's idealistic, but I think that this is what we should try to strive for, in my humble opinion.
Well, as a fellow idealist, I tend to think the same way. I want to share just a couple anecdotal things, and hopefully I will navigate these well. And if I don't perfectly, hopefully extend me grace. You know, what I've found with having, we're going to talk about diverse teams, and we're going to talk about what in just a moment um, the what are the merits of a diverse team. Taking a step back in my personal experience, one of the richest aspects of my 25 year career has been the friendships that I built in the corporate workspace, that
Mm.
because of the way that we tend to be outside of organizations where, let's be honest, because it seems easy and frictionless, a lot of folks tend to just hang out with folks that are like them. That's kind of that's it's not totally true, but there's a lot of that. But in the workspace and in a department and on a team, big or small, because of proximity, you end up forming these friendships that cross racial boundaries, age boundaries, just background, socioeconomic. And some of those friendships become like family. And you're like, hey, if it wasn't for this cool mix of this team that I was on because of this work assignment, without that, maybe these friendships just wouldn't happen. And that's just been one of the beautiful things when I think of, of my corporate, in my case, corporate journey, that has been just this little anecdotal sort of um gratitude that I have for the incredible wild mix of teams that I've been on. The other thing I would say is I do think that I saw over certainly the last 10 years um, a lot of great things happen in terms of the celebration of backgrounds and cultures. And I'm a curious guy, so I'm that guy that, admittedly, the groups I don't I'm not necessarily represented in any of the groups, but I love people and I love parties, and so I'm gonna go to all the events and make some friends, and then we're gonna go out and volunteer. Uh, and by and large, I had a really rich experience. Now there were experiences that I had and that I heard from others where that idea of inclusivity, like, hey, you don't self-identify, come to the celebration. You don't self-identify, come and take part and enjoy. And then other organizations that kind of I think unfortunately went the other way and said, hey, if you don't self-identify, this is not a place for you, whether it be in an ARG or an event externally or internally. And I thought, oh, what a shame that in the name of inclusivity, you've created something very exclusive.
Yeah,
And I don't, so I didn't think that that was the best version
yeah,
necessarily
yeah.
of of that. And I don't know, think that was intentional, but I did see some of that. And so, boy, there's so many different dimensions here. And I just, so many different dimensions. And with that being said, I want us to, why don't we drop the, let's drop the slides for a moment, because I really want to get into what, you've defined terms. We've talked about sort of what we're reading in the media about the big organizational responses. But what are you hearing in the boardroom? So we're 7 months. We're in the second half of 2025. We've lived a lot of lives in 2025. You've been in a lot of boardrooms, to a lot of conferences, a lot of
Yeah.
meetings. What are you hearing anecdotally in the
So
trenches?
yeah, so what's interesting is, so when you have the category of the four different areas where organizations, pull back, stand their ground. I think there was a third way. Um, what's interesting as I talk to leaders. So first thing first, let me establish something. This whole idea around diversity as a bad thing, I'm not sure that's a smart thing. When you look at, if we all look at our stock portfolio, if we were all to look at, are we invested everything in tech stocks, right? Are we diversifying that, right? So this idea around diversity as a concept is not a bad thing. I think being diverse gives you an opportunity to do more. But to that point, what I'm hearing, it's interesting. I was talking with a leader recently, and I said, how are you guys doing? And this leader said, it's business as usual. I said, okay, what does that mean? He said, it's business as usual. He said, we are having month over month, quarter over quarter wins. He said, we are doing fantastic. 40% of our leadership, women, 38% are people of color. He said, so we're doing fantastic. Now, we're not promoting, we're not out saying, hey, everyone, we have a lot of women, we have a lot of people of color. We're doing our business and we're being successful. So it's business as usual. They're not necessarily out promoting it, right? So that's one thing. But if you think about it from the standpoint of companies, companies are going to do what they need to do to be successful. So companies, we're in the business of making money. I'm in the business of making money. So I am going to put together a team, the best team, the most qualified people, regardless of where they're from, regardless of their background, regardless of their, and ensure that we can win. So companies, for the most part, they're about making money. And that's what they're going to do. Certainly, they're managing some of the messaging externally, but for the most part, they are ensuring that they have the right team in place to be successful. Now, let's take this back. Let's look at an athletic or sports analogy, right? I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. Where I'm from, football is big in Birmingham, right? Alabama. And the Alabama Crimson Tide football team had a legendary coach. There he is, Paul Bear Bryant. In 1970, the Alabama Crimson Tide, they were playing in my hometown, Birmingham, Alabama, Legion Field. And they were playing University of Southern California, as we call it, USC. At that time in 1970, the Alabama football team was totally white. They had no black players. It was a segregated team. Meanwhile, University of Southern California, coming from LA, they obviously had a few black players on their team. And one of the players they had on the team was a gentleman by the name of Sam Bam Cunningham. I think Sam Bam Cunningham was like one of the best running backs, may have been of All-American. And they were playing at Alabama's home field in Birmingham. And during this game, Sam Bam Cunningham ran about 135 yards, 2 to 3 touchdowns, and they beat Alabama about 41-25. I mean, literally just blew them out on their home field. And legend has it that at the end of that game, Paul Bear Bryant said that while it wasn't popular, he said that in order for us to compete, we're going to have to bring players of color onto our team if we want to compete. The next year, Alabama started their first black player. They won the Southeastern Conference Championship. They actually played in the national championship, and it's been it's been history since then. And legend also has it that Sam Bam Cunningham, he did more to integrate the University of Alabama and the University of Alabama football team in 60 minutes than Martin Luther King did in about 10 to 20 years, right? So that's kind of the legend. I mean, maybe hyperbole, but the point here is organizations are going to do what they need to do to be successful and to win. And even if it may not be popular, I will also state, I'm a big basketball fan. I believe right now the NBA is the best that it's ever been. And largely because...
Hold on, are we going to have the LeBron Jordan debate? Because, I'm a hardcore Jordan guy.
We're not going to have the LeBron. No, we're not going to have the LeBron.
All right.
But what we're going to have is, who are some of the best players in the NBA? Some of the best. So the most recent NBA champion and MVP, he's from Canada. The two-time MVP is a gentleman by the name of the Joker, right? It's from Serbia, right? Doncic.
Right. It's changed. It's become very international.
Yeah.
Extremely international.
Exactly. Some of the best players in the NBA are not from the inner city of Chicago, the inner city of New York. David Stern decided to make the NBA global, to make it more effective. And it's a much better league now because he created pathways for individuals to come from areas that normally we wouldn't see to come to the NBA. And now I think the NBA is much better because of that.
Well, I want to move on to a kind of a macro picture, but I think what you're saying is that companies are in the business of making money. Nonprofits need to raise money.
Yep.
Football teams and leagues need to win and compete for the eyes and attention of viewership. And
exactly.
they're gonna do and create teams that can drive them towards success at the end of the day. So it's interesting to see what brings success. And a leader's got to look at it and say, well, does this collection of people allow me to win,
right,
or not? And let's go to the next slide here, because I know you've got a lot of anecdotal, but it's a lot of anecdotal, so it's almost. But the analyst community has been speaking out on these things, and these would be pretty. I mean, you can debate how, if there are biases here or not, but these are pro-business, obviously pro-corporate analyst type organizations and consultancies. What are you seeing here? I mean, you had shared this with me, and I thought
Yeah.
this is
You
really
know,
interesting. These are very
right,
respected
right.
entities in my view.
Yeah. So right. So obviously I share my perspective, share my point of view, but at the end of the day, I'm not in the business of data, collecting the data. So you're looking at, what these data analysts are saying. So what this really talks about is just the remarkable value that you can bring into your organization by diversity, right? So if you look at what Gartner says, and we know Gartner's huge organization in terms of collecting data. What they're talking about in terms of these organizations where they have frontline decision makers, right? 75%
Right.
of those teams, are doing better, right? In terms of their financial targets. So this goes back to what we're talking about from a financial perspective. I love what Harvard Business Review is saying. Harvard Business Review, when I read this, diverse teams focus on facts and they improve teams group think, right? Diverse teams process those facts more carefully, resulting in better decision making. When I see that, that tells me that Harvard Business Review is saying diverse teams are smarter. They're smarter, right? Diverse teams are more innovative. And so when you think about it, when you think about organizations, companies, nonprofits, if you're trying to create a high-powered or highly performing team, this is what they're saying, that you want to bring in diverse ideas around these different things. Now, what's interesting, and I'll share a real quick point about me, and I know I don't want to run too far on time.
Yeah, we
Early in
got a
my
few more things we got
career,
to get to. We got
yeah,
to get to a
early in
few more
my
things. So
career, as a leader, I learned a great lesson, one that sticks with me today. How I brought my own biases, how I brought my own prejudices. When I tend to, when I had started off leading, there was an individual on my team who I loved. I loved the way he articulated his ideas. He had previously worked for Anderson Consultant. So we would have, ideation sessions, and I'm always listening to what he has to say. There's another gentleman on my team, and this was early in my career, and I hadn't really worked a lot with individuals from Asia, particularly from India. So I was too lazy to really get the understanding some of the dialect and so forth. So I struggled to understand some of the articulation of ideas. And so what would happen is when I would have these meetings, I would tend to listen more to this guy here who I love. He used to work for Accenture. I love the way he articulates his ideas. That's the way I like it. The other guy, while it was a good idea, I struggled to understand through some of the language. So I would not put much attention to what he was saying and more to this other individual. The most wonderful thing that happened was this guy from India told me, he said, during one of the one-on-ones, he said, Kevin, when we're having our meetings, you tend to put more emphasis on what this other guy is saying versus me. And I said, oh my gosh, I think I'm a good guy, but I did not create a culture voice. And that gentleman, his name was Raj, he helped me to understand that you have to create a culture voice and create an environment where everyone feels that their ideas can be brought to the table, that you're going to ideate on all of the ideas. And guess what? Our team was better because I now have available to me all of the ideas instead of the way that this one individual articulated. So that was something around the group think that was very helpful for me.
well, I appreciate the candidness there, because we probably, if you work in an organization long enough, there's a Raj there. There's someone that, because of some cultural or stylistic barrier, you unintentionally were a bit dismissive of. You didn't listen or
Exactly.
take the ideas. It just didn't connect as much. And good on him, but good on you for receiving that in such an open way. I
Yeah.
think that's the good stuff. That's really good stuff. So because we're coming down the last 10 minutes, I want to move over to, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? We've shared a ton of perspective, a ton of data, a ton of case studies of what different organizations are doing in light of the changes. We've got a lot of people that are going to be making decisions, or they're in the midst of it right now, that are listening here, or that will be on the replay. Where do we go from here? And I want you to bring it back to, I know you're passionate about the concept of belonging. So please, if you
Yeah.
let's not miss that.
Yeah. So a couple things, and I'll get into the belonging piece. First of all, um, Ty, what is the culture of your organization, right? If you are an organization where innovation is very important for you, or if problem solving is very important to you, or growth is very important to you. You can tie things like diversity to that, right? We just talked about how having, diverse teams, that improves groupthink, that improves innovation. So being able to tie it to that. I was speaking with a chief people officer who told me that when he's in the boardrooms, that's what he's talking about. How does it affect the culture of the company, right? And show the value, and especially it's also that, but also the merit that can be achieved there. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is nuance in language. I'm aware of a nonprofit whose mission used to be, we want to create 1 million jobs for we want to create jobs for 1 million Black people over the course of the next 10 years where these individuals don't have college degrees. Very, very specific about Black people. But maybe, they changed the mission. The mission was, let's create opportunities for individuals who don't go to college, who don't have college degrees. You're going to lift the boat. What they say, the boat, what is the phrase? The boat all
The
rise.
tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So focusing on the larger of individuals that don't necessarily have college degrees, you will be able to grab that, right? You will be able to grab that. I think another thing is around, we could talk about localization, but I just want to highlight this belonging idea.
Yeah, I know in our pre-conversations we spent a lot of time, and it really got my head thinking about this is because I think this is a crux piece. I really do.
Yeah, so belonging. I have a dear friend, David Ortiz. He's the managing partner for SEI, who they have really pushed forward with a very strong DEI program. But the big focus for them is largely around belonging. And I said, well, how is it? He said, we focus on belonging. We created environments where everyone can bring their authentic self. Whoever you are, you can feel comfortable bringing your authentic self. And when you feel that you belong, when you truly feel that what I have to say, what I have to contribute is going to be appreciated, I perform better. I achieve more. And so this idea around belonging, I think focusing on belonging, to me, that's a real big piece there, right? And then in addition to that, I think for like some of the nonprofits, localization, I think is important. I think we have a slide about that. So localization, really, if you are an organization where you said, listen, I want to focus on helping people of color, I want to focus on helping Black people, maybe that's not what you want to put in your mission. Maybe you say, I'm going to go and I'm going to build capacity and do something special in an area like Riviera Beach, where that town is heavily indexed Black, African American. Or if you want to help individuals that are from, that are more Latin or Hispanic, areas like San Antonio, having a focus around an area like San Antonio or Miami. Or, you have a big focus around individuals that are from Haiti, city like North Miami, where if you walk into the downtown, you go into the office, the mayor's office, you see a lot of people that are from Haiti. Or let's say you really want to focus on individuals that are from the LGBTQ community. Cities like Atlanta, I want to do something in Atlanta. You can have an impact on individuals. So this idea around localization, I think, is very important, where if you don't want to be very specific in your messaging and in the messaging on your mission, that you can actually go to an area where you're going to impact individuals and communities that matter to you.
Yeah, this is a very useful kind of framework here, where you can stay true to the things that maybe a company or a foundation or a nonprofit is really passionate about. But again, it's going to be really more about place-based philanthropy. A rising tide will lift all boats, and that'll be some of whom you've kind of had a particular focus on, and others in need as well. And it's really seems like it could be very much of a win-win type of a strategy. You brought up, and I think this is what I'd love to end on, if you're comfortable doing it. And I think it speaks to what I think would be belonging in the truest sense.
Yeah.
And you had talked about kind of an unusual case study in belonging.
Yeah, so going back to belonging, and I do believe I believe belonging is a secret sauce, right? I think that is the secret sauce. If you create that, and again, my friend David and what they're doing at SEI, they're spot on. Typically, historically, when you think about belonging, it's largely viewed through the perspective or through the lens of individuals or groups that have historically been marginalized. So people of color, women, disability, LGBTQ, sexual preference. When we think about belonging, we typically think about it through that lens. But here's the thing. What about that 29-year-old white man from the Appalachian who moves from the Appalachian to Atlanta, a city where Atlanta has a large number of African Americans there. And in fact, much of the culture in a city like Atlanta is very much a quote unquote African American Black culture. You know, this 29-year-old white male from the Appalachian, he goes to a company, he can go into a company, and that company can have a lot of Black leaders. A lot of the culture will be around Black. How does he belong? How do we create an environment where he can bring his authentic self and be okay? And when I say authentic, I'm not talking about, hey, I'm a white guy, 29-year-old, and I know the latest Beyonce song, or I know the latest dance, or I know no. I don't have a clue about any of that stuff. You know, my favorite singer is, Luke Ryan, or, I like to go fishing. I don't want to go to a party, whatever it may be. How can I bring my authentic self and I'm welcome? Because here's the thing. The white male has to find a community, in my opinion, where they belong. And so this idea around belonging needs to include all of us, right? It's not just the groups that historically been marginalized. It's also the white man, because we all know about the browning of America. We all know about the changing in the demographics. There may be a lot of white men that are afraid, like, wait, what does this mean for me in the future? So we have to come together. Belonging to me means let's bring that 29-year-old white guy who is, from the coal mine area, he moves into the city, he brings his culture, and we make it okay. So that's my thought about that.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, because I think we don't need to go back to the slide, but if we were to ever get really close to mastering the convergence of these frameworks, DEI, MEI, you got to solve for that. There should be, a true authenticity to belonging that really looks at who we traditionally are focused on, and some of those that kind of didn't come to mind as much,
Yeah.
but but truly from a human and professional standpoint, need to feel like, oh, there's a place for me in this team. And while I'm different, that's cool. That's cool too,
Exactly.
and when you feel that, and by the way, you and I have had enough professional adventures along the way. You've been in good corporate environments culturally, and not so good. If you can nail that, you will have high performing and really long tenured teams, and magic can happen. And that's going to require leadership, because there's a tension there, right? There's a
Yeah.
constant tension to need to solve for that as a leader. And it takes, I think, next level leadership. Speaking of next level leadership, that is you, my friend. I hate that this has to come to an end,
Thank
but
you.
you've honored all of us here with your just being real. I know you might have had people saying, "Don't come on that," that could,
Yeah.
but you have been courageous, and you've provided people with some great practical perspectives that I think can really, really help people make great decisions in the next half of 2025 and beyond. I want to bring up a slide real quick, or do you have any last things you want to say?
I just want to commend you, Alex, and your team. Your courage to continue to help make our world better, because it's broader than just the corporate environment. You're making the world better, and it takes a remarkable amount of courage, and you're demonstrating that. So thank you for the platform. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you as well as your audience. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kevin. If we could put up that last slide of our next Impact Lab, um, which is not too far from now, August 20th. One of our amazing team members, Clay Ferrara, is going to be leading this Impact Lab with his special guest, Chris Castro, who's the EVP, Chief Sustainability Officer at Climate First Bank. And they're going to be talking about organizational sustainability, surviving the rising tide of sustainability. we're hearing it's very difficult for a lot of organizations, particularly in the nonprofit sector. But going back to this topic, everyone, if you're an organization leader, an organization owner, if you're an HR professional and you're wrestling through how to kind of navigate this time of change from a DEI, MEI, middle third way perspective, we'd love to talk with you. Just schedule some time and we will wrestle with this issue and what that means for you and your organization. We want to honor your time by ending on time. It is noon. I hope you enjoy your lunch. I hope you've enjoyed the last hour. We hope to see you on October 12th. I'm sorry, October 20th for our next Impact Lab. See you guys.
See you.